Welcome to Nice Ashes. I'm Nate.
And I am Mike. What are we smoking today, Nate?
We are smoking a Rocky Patel Super Ligero.
That's how I would say it.
All right. There's a couple other ways I was thinking of, but this was the one that sounded most appropriate.
Yes. Yeah, I suppose so. This is very dark, and it had a little tang on the tip when I licked it.
Yeah.
What are you pairing your cigar with?
I was just going to ask you that. I am pairing mine with a New Belgium Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA.
Do you actually like Voodoo Ranger?
Yeah, and I will fight you if you don't.
I was going to. I'll get to it
once I'm.
Yeah, once I'm done lighting, I will fight you. So years ago, when I was in college, and I was bowling at a very small bowling alley.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't even think we're a minute in, Mike, and you're mentioning bowling right off the bat.
I am right off the bat. The bowling alley was a beer bowling alley, and he would allow you to bring liquor in, but he couldn't sell because it was a small wood house. They had a really great bar. Anyway, but he always had what he called the cheap keg. So the local beer distributor, he would just get whatever the cheapest keg was that was basically out of date.
Okay.
And he would charge like $5 for a pitcher at any time of day for whatever the cheap keg was.
Yeah.
And then I think like Bud Light and stuff like that was like $7.50 or whatever, $6, whatever it was. So of course I was always drink the cheap keg beer.
Yes.
And Voodoo Ranger was the cheap keg beer for a year because it has that like extremely green flavor.
Yeah.
It gets so hoppy. And I drank a ton of it that year because it was $5 a pitcher.
Yep.
And I'm like, I can't go wrong, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on which one you get. So the Imperial IPA, I think it's like 8 or 9%. Yeah, 9% by volume. So you're not drinking a pitcher of that probably, but maybe. But they've got a whole slew. I mean, there's like a whole line of their beer. So they've got, like the Hazy Ranger, the Juicy Ranger. I don't know. They've got all these Rangers out there now.
Right. This is like the original OG, like 15 years ago. Yeah, like they still allow smoking in bars.
But I get it from time to time.
Sure. Yeah.
I figured
they still allowed smoking at the time.
Season it is that I'd treat myself a little bit to a higher percentage beer for this episode.
Absolutely. So
I do have a quick cigar note or two. I like the first few puffs. My wrapper, my label, is fairly loose and is sliding like back and forth. So I'm just going to pull that off. But
okay, mine
is
not loose.
But
yeah, mine's not loose. I actually really like this wrapper. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you were saying you really like this wrapper, like the graphic design of it?
Yeah, it looks like 1996. Like I really like the turquoise and yeah, it's very nice looking.
Yes. There will be a picture on our episode description. So
very dark cigar so far, like incredibly dark.
And I think Mike and I both have an update from last episode. I haven't been able to stop orgasming ever since downloading the Kegel app for my phone. And it's just continuous. I think I'm done, and then it's like, oh no, here I go again. So I think Mike and I are both a little dehydrated, but anyway.
It's incredible. I am pairing this, by the way, with Bruegel Double Reserve Dominican whiskey.
Oh, how's that?
It's very good. I like it. Very strong. It's a little sweet. You could confuse it for a dark rum.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got a little spice to it, but it's very good. It's not like bourbon.
Okay. Well, it sounds right up my alley.
But it is very good all the same. Yeah, it's a little spicy. Like I say, you could confuse it for a rum.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of we're getting into that season now where all of your booze and alcohol things will typically have a little bit more spice in them.
Yeah. It's a theme.
Yeah.
For sure.
Speaking of themes, what are we talking about, Mike?
So, Nate, I don't want you to get mad.
I already know it's not what I thought it was going to be when you were like, I've got a topic.
I didn't want to lie directly to you. But I wanted to not talk about it because I was like, this is a bait and switch, and I didn't want you to be prepared for it overly because I didn't want you to tell me that we couldn't do it as an episode topic.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay, let's get our disclaimers out quick then. We're not medical professionals.
We are adults, and we're having an adult conversation about adult things. And Nate and I might not agree about the content.
I'm worried about it.
Of
with the adult
our
preface.
discussion, and I think that many of our listeners might not agree.
Which one do you think they're not going to agree with? If we're at odds, which side are our listeners taking? Let us know on our Facebook page.
Yeah, let us know on our Facebook page. But I think that they might not even agree with their own spouses about this issue because it's very emotional. And some people are more directly invested than others.
Is it housework?
Yeah, I wish it was. No, we're going to talk about, and this is not off the radar because I've talked about it.
Okay.
As background, last week, a letter that was written by Osama bin Laden became extremely popular online. It exploded. And I sent it to you, Nate. I don't think you read it, though.
Why would you think I didn't? I read it. I didn't read the whole thing because the paragraphs had numbers, but I kind of skimmed it.
The paragraphs have numbers because it was written by Osama bin Laden. He's a crazy person, and it reads like out of the Bible, where it's got like the numbers and letters and everything.
Yeah. The Book of Bin Laden.
The Book of Bin Laden. So anyway, this letter popped up again after 20 years, and it made a lot of fire. And I wouldn't have covered it, but people are getting.
Did it circulate 20 years ago, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we didn't have the internet that we have today 20 years ago.
It did circulate 20 years ago, so that's part of it. We'll talk about that as we get in. Because I have read this letter before. I read it as part of a class, an organized class in college during the events of the Afghan and Iraq wars, right? So I have a little bit more. I guess this is not the first time that I read it, and I'm not surprised by anything.
Yeah. So it says that the Guardian has removed the document.
That made me so
But now
irate.
I found it on, I don't know what dni.gov is, but they've got the full PDF here.
Yes.
This is only 4 pages, so I don't know if that's the full document or not.
It's only about 4 pages.
Okay.
For like real pages, yeah, about 4 real pages.
Okay. Yeah, this one doesn't have all the numbers and letters on the paragraphs. It just has the paragraphs. I think whatever link you sent me in the first place must have put those on there so you could talk about different sections.
No, it hasn't on there because I sent you an archive, a Google archive of the page.
Yeah.
So it had been broken down because it got taken off last week, and I wouldn't have covered it, but it got taken down. Like the Guardian took down a 20-year-old article about something because it became popular again and people started to question the narrative.
Yeah.
And that's not acceptable right now at all. And it's like this sort of topic is something that has to be talked about in hushed tones behind closed doors, right? Like it's not acceptable.
What better platform than our podcast?
Right.
Yes.
And it offends me that the Guardian thought it was acceptable to take this down when it's clearly a level 1 source, primary source document of one of the most important figures of the 21st century. Right? Like Osama bin Laden, like it or not, is one of the most important figures of the late 20th and early 21st century. Right?
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I don't know if important, but like certainly infamous. In the same sense, I don't know that you would really say Hitler is one of the most important figures.
Yes, I would. All right, yes, I would.
Fine. I'm saying just the
evil guy is. I mean, Stalin is important, right? He's
yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I just wanted to clarify that we're not.
No, I am not pro bad guy.
We're not pro bad people.
No, I am absolutely not pro bad people.
But that doesn't take anything away from these people's importance and the devastating effects that they set in motion, I guess.
Right. It's kind of like the meme that was going around a couple of years ago of Hulk Hogan body slamming the Giant. Andre the Giant, but then they erased Hulk Hogan out of it because he had been removed from the Hall of Fame because he's a naughty boy or whatever. I guess. You have to. It's historical context, right? And this is a primary document that is within our adult lifetime, and I think it's Orwellian. And then the real kicker, the thing that really set me off, was that somebody in England published a paper asking for 1984 to be censored because it is sexist. It doesn't have enough female characters in it.
Yep.
And I don't know if you heard that in the scuttlebutt or not.
No, but they're always trying to ban 1984 and Fahrenheit 451, and they're always
Animal
trying
Farm.
to ban all of these books. And if you want to ban 1984 because there's not enough women in it, go and watch The Marvels by yourself because nobody else is going.
Right. So anyway, I figured that we would read the letter because there's a lot of TikToks. And here's the part. All the TikToks and tweets and everything are all being censored and taken down.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that hard to find it. But at the same time, it's important to talk about what's in it. And I'm going to agree with a significant portion of what's in it. I'm also going to vehemently want to start a 20-year-long war with the other parts, right? Like, there's a mixture of things and the nuance of understanding that maybe some of the things that this crazy guy said have some legitimacy to them, just as much as some of them are Timothy McVeigh level psychotic, right? Yeah, it's not all it's not all bad, right? It's not all good for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I don't know that you can be a crazy person without having peeled back at least the outer layer of the onion, and having at least some truth in there.
Right.
So I don't know what the Scientologists have over other people that get them to sign up, but you can't be the leader of a large terrorist group if you're
not have some convincing arguments.
Yeah.
Right. And that's so I read this and we discussed it for a week in one of my political science classes in college.
Okay.
And it was because there's a mixture of good and bad points, right? And the whole idea was can America actually address and fix the things that they can and eliminate a lot of the terrorist problem, right?
Yeah.
Is that possible? And yeah, it is, right?
So let's because you're gonna read this thing, or are we gonna alternate paragraphs or something?
No, I'll read it. I'll read it all. I'll read it all, and I'll read it a paragraph or two, and we can discuss what's in it, and then I'll read a paragraph or two.
Are you gonna read it in your best Osama bin Laden?
No, I am not going to do that.
Okay. So let's get a little. Let's pull back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go 20 years ago or whenever this came out. Was this before 9/11 or after 9/11?
A year after is when it got. Yep, a year after.
Okay. So do we know when it was written? Because it was released a year after.
It was released in November of 2002. So I'm going to guess probably between 9/11 and then.
Okay. So it's not like this was. It's not like this was a letter that was sent out to the American people, even though it's addressed to the American people, to say, look, if you don't make some serious changes, 9/11 is going to happen or something.
No, this was after the fact.
This was after the fact. So I just wanted to make sure so that we kind of understood where this is coming from, so we can already kind of take it as the thing has happened, the bad thing.
Right. And for those who don't know, Osama bin Laden and the United States government have had ties for 20 years before this point. He's a super wealthy Arab guy that was fighting the good fight on the side of the United States before, the Al-Qaeda days. So, yeah. It's very interesting. Anybody who's interested in the backstory should look it up because he's buddies with George Bush, right? That kind of level of power and influence on the global stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who is, of course, a psycho. So we're going
Bush
to...
or bin Laden.
Right. Right. So we're going to start. And like I say, so many people got so upset that 20-year-olds who had never heard of this because they weren't even alive yet had never read this, and they were shocked that they had been lied to about certain things politically that the United States does. So we're going to go through it and we'll discuss like adults, and we may disagree.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's go through it. Let's remember, myself included, and our listeners, to keep an open mind and civilly discuss this. And like Mike said, it's been on the news, even though they've taken down a lot of the copies of this on the internet. And like he said, they're banning it from TikTok and other things.
The news is just barking. It's like people are frothing at the mouth, barking. Yeah. It's like, this is not that big of a...
Which is
this
interesting
is not
because,
that big of a deal.
Like we said a couple episodes ago about the Anthony Fauci book, nobody's taking that down or demanding censorship of that. And
Right.
so, it's strange, it's not strange that they're doing it for this, but, there's reasons, I guess, for both. So anyway, enough stalling. Let's get into this thing.
All right, so it opens. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. And this is like the start of the tone, right? Like it's psychobabble, some of it.
Yeah.
And that's like, religious zealot. There's a quote from the Quran. It's permission to fight against disbelievers is given to those believers who are fought against because they have been wronged. And surely Allah is able to give them believers victory. A second quote from the Quran. Those who believe fight in the cause of Allah, and those who disbelieve fight in the cause of Tagut, which is anything other than Allah. So fight you against the friends of Satan. Ever feeble is indeed the plot of Satan. So he leads off with two religious quotes that are violent, right? Not a good start, right? Well, it is if you want to make Osama bin Laden seem like a complete psycho, which he kind of is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if you want to rabble-rouse those that are already following you.
Right. Which he was at the time.
Yeah.
Some American writers have published articles under the title, On What Basis Are We Fighting? These articles have generated a number of responses, some of which adhered to the truth and were based on Islamic law, and others which have not. Here we wanted to outline the truth as an explanation and warning, hoping for Allah's reward, seeking success and support from Him. While seeking Allah's help, we form our reply based on two questions directed at the Americans. Question 1, why are we fighting and opposing you? Question 2, what are we calling you to and what do we want from you? And these are the two important factors, right?
Yes.
The part that they want to censor is question 1. Why are we fighting and opposing you? The part that they want everybody to focus on is the second part, which is what they're calling us to do, which is crazy. We'll get there. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Get my cigar relit.
Oh, no, you've been talking too much, Mike.
I know, right? As for the first question, why are we fighting and opposing you? The answer is very simple. 1, because you attacked us and continue to attack us, right? So, under 1, there's the A. You attacked us in Palestine. Subsection I. Palestine, which has sunk under military occupation for more than 80 years, now would be over 100 years. The British handed over Palestine with your help and your support to the Jews, who have occupied it for more than 50 years, now more than 70, years overflowing with oppression, tyranny, crimes, killing, expulsion, destruction, and devastation. The creation and continuation of Israel is one of the greatest crimes, and you are the leaders of its criminals. And of course, there's no need to explain and prove the degree of American support for Israel. The creation of Israel is a crime which must be erased. Each and every person whose hands have become polluted in the contribution towards this crime must pay its price and pay for it heavily. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I guess I can't really disagree about Americans attacking people.
It's very difficult to not agree that he has a valid point, that what's going on in Palestine from the perspective of the Palestinians is not good at all, right? Like bad.
And and this kind of gets into some of that stuff that is currently going on with Hamas and Israel and Gaza and stuff, because a lot of people don't like the whole Israel thing.
Right.
And people sometimes ask me what my feelings on that are, and I don't really have any feelings on that because I haven't done the research to figure out if the creation of Israel or anything like that was a good idea, a bad idea. The Middle East is just, at least from what I understand, which might be incorrect, is just kind of like a hotbed of hate and angry people that want to fight the other angry person who's angry over the same thing. So just on different sides.
Right. And I've done a lot of research on it, and I don't think it's relevant to think about whether or not anything should or should not have happened. Israel exists. They're a very close ally of the United States. They're a first world nation. They have a very good economy, right? All this stuff. The problem I have is that they are not behaving in a way that a highly developed economy does towards its own citizens, because they do not have equal rights for every person in that country. And that's the root cause of the issue, right? Like they are not an egalitarian modern society the way that they should be if they want peace internally. Yeah. And that's just unfortunate. And that's the way it is, So it's hard to argue that what's going on in Palestine is good, especially from the perspective of the Palestinians.
Yeah. Well, and so he's going on about, well, he's starting in on, right? Like, so it sounds like he doesn't like Jewish people.
Well, it'll get worse. He's an anti-Semite psycho person, right? Like it's not a criticism of the actions of the Israeli government. It's like a conspiracy theory level hatred for Jewish people, which is, he's an insane terrorist. So of course he's going to have like.
Yeah. But now let's, with some of the stuff that I've seen online anyway, with the modern issue, the modern diversion by the political overlords that have tried to suck us into the Ukraine-Russia war first, and that kind of lost traction. So they decided, well, let's do the Israel-Gaza thing. Yes. And some of the stuff coming out about that is pretty intense and hateful, and very anti-Semitic as well. Oh, yeah. And that's by people here in America. So saying that bin Laden is a crazy anti-Semite might not actually be that far from the truth of what a lot of, I guess, Americans are, at least vocal Americans are, which is,
It appears to me right now that, at least on the Israel-Palestine conflict, the loudest voices are people who are rabidly hateful towards the other side.
Yeah.
And it's like clearly genocidal and racist on both sides.
Yeah.
It's psychotic. Like, it reminds me of the like memoirs of the settlers of the United States talking about Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like Geronimo and like the crazy war talk of that era of war chiefs. Right. Where it's like, there's no way that this is going to go well if you don't get peace now and change your society. Yeah. It's just going to be ugly. And we have a great example in what happened in America. Like, clearly it wasn't very good for the people involved.
No.
So, okay. Subsection 2. It brings us both of paragraph A of subsection 1. Yeah.
Revelations 3.0.
It's very well organized. I'll give him that. It brings us both laughter and tears to see you have not yet tired of repeating your fabricated lies that the Jews have historical right to Palestine, as it was promised to them in the Torah. Anyone who disputes with them on this alleged fact is accused of anti-Semitism. This is one of the most fallacious, widely circulated fabrications in history. The people of Palestine are pure Arabs and original Semites. It is the Muslims who are the inheritors of Moses, peace be upon him, and the inheritors of the real Torah that is not changed. Muslims believe in all of the prophets, including Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon them all. If the followers of Moses have been promised a right to Palestine in the Torah, then the Muslims are the most worthy nation of this. When the Muslims conquered Palestine and drove out the Romans, Palestine and Jerusalem returned to Islam, the religion of all prophets, peace be upon them. Therefore, the call to a historical right to Palestine cannot be raised against the Islamic Ummah that believes in all the prophets of Allah, peace and blessings be upon them. And we make no distinction between them. So he followed up like a decent point with like some religious nonsense that...
Yeah, like
I shouldn't say religious nonsense.
Well, it is, though. I mean... It's,
from my perspective, it is.
Well, from my perspective, it is too. It's no different than going to a Catholic service or a Lutheran service or a Baptist service or, any of those evangelizing religions that are 100% convinced that they are the only right and true religion. Therefore, their prophets are the only right and true prophets. And anything God ever said that anybody ever bothered to write down only applies to their people because they're the true religion,
Right.
And it doesn't matter. Like the Mormons say the same thing. They're Joseph Smith is the true prophet. He's the second coming of Christ or whatever. His magic hat is infallible. And anybody else can go to hell, basically. And, so he's not so much like walking the fine line of making points and tying in some religious background. He's kind of like bouncing back and forth the line of sanity.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
First two paragraphs.
The whole thing is like this, where it's like one thing is a prescient like point, and the other thing is like this religious mumbo jumbo that is not going to convince me.
Just in case you forgot I was evil and off my rocker, here's the next paragraph.
Yeah, he's like that. He really is like a supervillain. Like, we're gonna read through. He sounds like a supervillain.
Oh yeah. Well, let's keep at it.
Yeah. All right. Subsection 3 of A. The blood pouring out of Palestine must be equally revenged. You must know that the Palestinians do not cry alone. Their women are not widowed alone. Their sons are not orphaned alone. Good supervillain talk.
Yeah, all right. If he got rid of the first part, talking about repaying the bloodshed, like it's a very valid point that nobody's widowed alone and nobody's orphaned alone, but
it is true. Like, but
you're tying it in with all this.
He's not Abraham Lincoln, is he? Right?
No. A house divided cannot stand. This is
right. Like,
if my streets don't run with your blood like your streets ran with my blood, then things will not be right with the universe.
Right.
But we're the one true religion, so come join us.
Yeah, so we're automatically the good guys, can do no wrong. Like, that reminds me of the Bob Dylan song, God is on our side, right? Like, of course. Everybody, God's always on your side, isn't it? But anyway, so now we're on to B. We're off of the subsections. You attacked us in Somalia. You supported the Russian atrocities against us in Chechnya, the Indian oppression against us in Kashmir, and the Jewish aggression against us in Lebanon. C. Under your supervision, consent, and orders, the governments of our countries, which act as your agents, attacked us on a daily basis. Subsection I. These governments prevent our people from establishing Islamic Sharia using violence and lies to do so. Now, he's talking about how the United States assisted in invasions of Islamic territories.
Yeah.
But then he says you prevented us from establishing Sharia, which I kind of support. Like, I don't support ethno-states or religious-based governments. So
are you saying you support Sharia law or you don't support Sharia?
Yeah, I'm firmly against any sort of legal system that is not based on non-religious practices.
Yeah. So part of that, it could have been written by, Thomas Jefferson, let's say, or George Washington or Ben Franklin, right? Like, part of that could have almost been written by one of the founding fathers or one of the early American patriots saying to England, like, you and your agents have not allowed us to do this and that and the other thing. But again, here he's taking it to, like you said, super villain, I'm the underminer kind of levels.
Yeah. So it's not all good and it's definitely not all bad, right? I cannot agree with half of that statement.
Yeah. We can't refute some of that statement, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. So subsection I. These governments give us a taste of humiliation and places us in a large prison of fear and subdual. These governments steal our Ummah's wealth and sell them to you at a paltry price. These governments have surrendered to the Jews and handed them most of Palestine, acknowledging the existence of their state over the dismembered limbs of their own people. Okay,
so he's talking about oil here, right?
He's talking about oil.
Yeah.
The dictators that they installed in the Middle East all through the 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s. And then he has to go against the Jews again.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to laugh at that, but I don't know how else to say it. It's like,
well, there's no other way to say it.
Good point. Bad point.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah. There's certainly, I don't know if this is going to be wrong, but like Mike said at the beginning, we're all adults. If you have a problem with what I'm about to say, take it up with Mike, because I simply won't listen. I'm just kidding. But, there's certainly a fair number of Jewish people that are in positions of power in certain areas in the world. Is that true or not true, Mike?
It is true.
So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil spirited. That doesn't mean that every single Jew is in charge of everything. Like, you have a Jewish friend, they're not necessarily the top 1% making life and death decisions about Osama bin Laden's cohorts in Afghanistan.
Well, the issue is that there's like that crazy conspiracy that there's like, it's like the crazy international Jewish conspiracy theory where they're like ruling the world, right? Which is utter nonsense.
Well,
and then they point to
that's what I'm saying, is that there's enough credibility to an extent to say that, yes, there are incredibly powerful Jewish people.
Sure, there's incredibly powerful people of any religious background.
That's my next point is. But then in the next breath, you also have to say, well, there's super powerful Catholic people. There's super powerful Protestant people. There's, so it's just, it's very much to be picking one religion that he hates the most of all other religions.
Yes.
And kind of, making them the scapegoat. And I mean, that kind of already happened in the 40s, 30s and 40s, man.
It reminds me a lot of like the anti-Catholic talk with the Supreme Court, because there's Catholics have controlled the Supreme Court for a while.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's not a fucking Catholic conspiracy theory, dude. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe it is, but not that I'm aware of.
Well, maybe it is, but the president has to submit people for nomination, right?
Yeah. And there's only been 2 Catholic presidents. So there we go.
So it's, anyway, I think I'm just now a little bit over halfway with this cigar.
I'm around there.
Yeah. I don't want to take too much of a break from the crazy talk. Well, half crazy, half kind of saying things people should already know, I suppose. This is very, very dark.
Very dark, very spicy, very good.
And the cigar is good as well, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the letter. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, right?
Yeah, the cigar. I like this cigar. This is a good cigar.
It's sweet too.
Yeah, it's got a very, very interesting and good flavor profile.
I thought it would match well with the topic. That's why I picked it.
Yeah, and
no,
here
I'm not gonna lie.
I grabbed the high percentage beers because I thought we were doing a history of Thanksgiving, and it was kind of like phone this one in, and Nate doesn't have to be worried about what he might spew forth out of his mouth. And now here we are, Mike.
I'm drinking whiskey, so yeah, there we go. Right? Yes.
So
okay.
Small Roman numerals 3. Is there one of those? No, we're on
we
to the next.
we read 3, 2, 3, and 4. We're now on small numeral 5.
Okay.
Again, and so here we go. The removal of these governments is an obligation upon us, and it is a necessary step to free the Ummah, to make the Sharia the supreme law, and to regain Palestine. And our fight against these governments is not separate from our fight against you. So there's a mixed statement again. Like he's talking about Somalia and Chechnya and these other dictators. And he's got to bring up Palestine and Israel and it's Sharia law. And it's like, dude, it's a mixed bag. Like,
yeah, I guess like geographically, it's a fairly small area, the Middle East.
It's small by comparison to like continental United States, but it's a very large and diverse region.
Most things are, but I mean, even Europe is small-ish geographically comparatively to the United States. I mean,
professor. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say they've got more neighboring countries than we do. We have 2, right? We've got Canada and Mexico, so we only have 2 neighbors, and there's only a handful of states that even border those countries. So. It's a little different, and I'm not trying to say he's right. I'm just trying to understand or shed a little maybe insight on why he's trying to lump all these things together, because everything borders everything over there, Europe and Middle East, and to some extent, the African countries as well. So it's just they see them more. I mean, we talk here in Minnesota, we talk more about like the Dakotas, Iowa, Wisconsin. And maybe Michigan if we're playing them in football or something. So
right. Well, Montana is like 13 hours away from where I live or whatever. So it's a haul. Like it's a very long distance, hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
So
anyway, let's carry on with the crazy lump grabbing.
Yes. You steal our wealth and oil at paltry prices because of you international. See, that's like a little error. Of you international influence, should be your international influence and military threats. This theft is indeed the biggest theft ever witnessed by mankind in the history of the world.
I don't know.
Second biggest now. That's true. Your forces occupy our countries. You spread your military bases throughout them. You corrupt our lands and you besiege our sanctities. All right. Agreed so far. To protect the security of Jews and to ensure the continuity of your pillage of our treasures. Now, again, if he would have left out the anti-Semitic talk, I would have to agree 100%. And it's obviously tainted by like this hatred and vitriol and evil. That's what he was about, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I agree that the theft, what he calls the theft of oil, is like the biggest theft known to humanity, it's certainly the one that impacts him the most, right?
Right. Yes.
You could say, you could ask any Native American here in America, ask if, the colonies coming over didn't result in the greatest theft known to mankind. But you could also say that of Genghis Khan or almost any
African
other
slavery,
conquering nation of anything. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's not the most important to him, but
it's the most important to him.
But that's what it is. And it's interesting or funny, I guess, in like a dark haha kind of way, that he thinks that all of this is done to keep Jews
in power
and strong,
which is
happy,
Yeah, it's not just to steal your oil to develop Western economies.
Yeah. It's not just to steal
Clearly
the oil
answer,
to keep
right?
politicians rich over here. It has to be the Jews in particular.
Right. It's wacko stuff. That's why he's a terrorist and not like a normal politician, right?
Yeah, and he's not not speaking on the TED stage,
Exactly. All right, F. You have starved the Muslims of Iraq, where children die every day. It is a wonder that more than 1.5 million Iraqi children have died as a result of your sanctions, and you did not show concern. Yet, when 3,000 of your people died, the entire world rises and has not yet sat down.
And won't
Hard
for some
to
time.
deny that. Right. G, the very next point. You have supported the Jews in their idea that Jerusalem is their eternal capital and agreed to move your embassy there. With your help and under your protection, the Israelis are planning to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque under the protection of your weapons. Sharon entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque to pollute it as a preparation to capture and destroy it. So, yet again.
What is
here we go.
So who entered the temple?
Sharon was the former prime minister of Israel.
So their religion is they won't stand for a non-Muslim to be in their holy grounds, right?
Yeah, but here's the deal. They took over the Hagia Sophia and turned it into a mosque, right? They put the Dome of the Rock on top of
I remember that
third Jewish temple.
Dome of the Rock thing.
Yeah, the Muslims have done this to Christians and Jews historically.
Have you not been paying attention? The Muslims are the one true religion, and all their prophets, peace be upon them.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, come on, they already owned it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess, according to
God's on their side.
Yep. Hey, you know what? Let's get Toby Keith on as a guest, and he'll tell us how God was on our side.
I know, right? Oh my God, Toby Keith. Anyway, number 2. These tragedies and calamities are only a few examples of your oppression and aggression against us. It is commanded by our religion and intellect that the oppressed have a right to return the aggression. Do not await anything from us but jihad, resistance, and revenge. It is in any way rational to expect that after America has attacked us for more than half a century, that we will then leave her to live in security and peace.
Why are you writing a letter then, bro?
Right. And again, it's hard. It's a legitimate point. You may then dispute that all the above does not justify aggression against civilians for crimes they did not commit and offenses for which they did not partake.
I think we certainly can say that retaliation against civilians is not, but
he's going to explain why that's not legitimate in his eyes.
Peace be on them.
Yes. Anyway, this argument contradicts your continuous repetition that America is the land of freedom and its leaders in this world. Therefore, the American people are the ones who chose their government by way of their own free will, a choice which stems from their agreement to its policies. Thus, the American people have chosen, consented to, and affirmed their support for the Israeli oppression of the Palestinians, the occupation and usurpation of their land, and its continuous killing, torture, punishment, and expulsion of the Palestinians. The American people have the ability and choice to refuse the policies of their government and even to change it if they want.
So I've got 2 thoughts on this one, Mike.
I'm of 2 minds on this as well.
Well, I'm not necessarily of 2 minds. I've got 2 thoughts on it. One is he must have skipped the Electoral College Day in U.S. governmental proceedings, for one. And 2, on the other hand, this paragraph is exactly what our government told us, or kind of the big American groupthink was at the time. I remember a lot of people saying, well, why shouldn't we firebomb all of Afghanistan and Iraq and all these fucking places with these cave dwellers? And if they don't like what their government's doing, they can do what America did, and they can overthrow the British Empire and become their own thing. And that was a lot of the talk going on at the time to get a lot of people, rah, let's just carpet bomb everybody and call it good. And, so in retrospect, I can see how both sides are wrong on that.
Yes.
But at the time it was written, that was the exact same stuff that was being pumped out to the American masses.
Number one, it shows his lack of understanding of the American political system. And number two, it kind of exposes our lack of understanding of our political system as well.
Yes.
So.
Well, and if you think about it, I've heard said that only a small percentage of Americans actually stood up to fight against Britain. So American politics has kind of always been the loudest minority voice speaking on behalf of the majority.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So
that's what democracy is largely anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay, B, the American people are the ones who pay the taxes which fund the planes that bomb us in Afghanistan, the tanks that strike and destroy our homes in Palestine, the armies which occupy our lands in the Arabian Gulf, and the fleets which ensure the blockade of Iraq. These tax dollars are given to Israel for it to continue to attack us and penetrate our lands. So the American people are the ones who fund the attacks against us, and they are the ones who oversee the expenditure of these monies in the way they wish through their elected candidates.
See, he had me until he said that therefore we control how these dollars are spent. But yes, we fund all of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We definitely fund all of it. Our tax dollars pay for it all.
Yeah, and all of these bills, though, are stuck into other things like do you want to help poor, needy children and also bomb Afghanistan?
Pork and graft and everything.
You don't want to bomb Afghanistan. Think of the children, because this is part of a childhood whatever bill.
Yeah, that's attached to the farm bill.
Yeah.
So, all right. C. Also, the American army is part of the American people. It is this very same people who are shamelessly helping the Jews fight against us.
There it is, the other shoe.
There it is. You gotta, like I say, it's only so long before the crazy starts to come out, right?
Yeah.
And now it's disturbing to read because you really have to be very critical very critical.
It's even harder to read nowadays or read on a podcast nowadays because critical thinking has declined in our population drastically.
Right. It has. People want to pick a side and be on the good guy side, and the other people are bad guys, and of course they cannot possibly.
And I don't know that people even want to really be on the good guy side. They just want to be on the side that gives them the less grief later on in life,
Oh, possibly, yeah.
Sometimes. Look at a lot of this tweet from this director 27 years ago that was clearly a joke then is offensive nowadays. So we're going to fire them and blacklist them and all that stuff. But
So, all right.
I guess I had the least amount of problem thus far, maybe with that short paragraph or sentence.
We're gonna read a couple here because there's some truths mixed with politics. The American people are the ones who employ both their men and women in the American forces which attack us. This is why the American people cannot be not innocent of all the crimes committed by the Americans and Jews against us.
I was gonna wait for. I was like, "Don't you mean Jews, man?"
But
he does. He does.
There's only so much that can be said good about this, right?
Yeah.
Allah the Almighty legislated the permission and the option to take revenge. Thus, if we are attacked, then we have the right to attack back. Whoever has destroyed our villages and towns, then we have the right to destroy their villages and towns. Whoever has stolen our wealth, then we have the right to destroy their economy. And whoever has killed our civilians, then we have the right to kill theirs. The American government and press still refuses to answer the questions. Why did they attack us in New York and Washington? If Sharon is a man of peace in the eyes of Bush, then we are also men of peace. America does not understand the language of manners and principles, so we are addressing it using the language it understands. All right, question 2.
Is this like Ayn Rand back from the dead?
I know, right? It's very pedantic, and it will eventually turn into just an anti-Semitic tirade at the end.
Yeah.
So,
how much more do we have, Mike? Because I'm kind of looking at my cigar going, if we want to talk about this, maybe I should just let you read.
Again, we don't have to read it all. We're getting a good picture of the tone.
Yeah.
And that's the important part, is that this is not necessarily about the content of the letter, which I think everybody should read on their own. It's more about, why is this being censored? Why, this is an important document to understand the enemies that we're facing these days and the root cause of the problem. And we are our government, at least, is partially responsible for the bad things happening. And our government could correct those actions, and then a lot of the support would fall away, because certainly not every person that's involved in these movements is like a rabid anti-Semite. Some of them are surely there because of the other factors that he's talking about, right? So even if you can diminish their forces by 50%, it would be more manageable, right?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know. I mean, if we want to get into just kind of like overall thoughts, I guess, I mean, maybe this is kind of the problem that we've talked about multiple times on the show, where people can't just communicate with one another of differing opinions and viewpoints. And on the other hand, like if the United States addressed some of these issues, it would definitely mean a loss of revenue for the top 1% of Americans, and the politicians.
Oh, yes.
Less things to funnel the war fund into and whatnot. But I remember growing up and in high school, my parents had a copy of Mein Kampf in their library.
Yes.
Not, and I don't know. I mean, I never asked my dad, but my grandpa fought in World War II against the Nazis, so I don't think it was because they were sympathetic of Hitler. But Mein Kampf back in their era was like required reading, much like
I read Mein Kampf as part of a course in school. Yeah, because in understanding like the root causes of the bizarre hatred that was the root of the Second World War was important.
Yeah, and it's all art school. Like, they didn't like them, and look what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. No, I mean, the professor that I had that I took this class with was a Muslim from Oman, and he hated Osama bin Laden. Like, he was a rabid anti-terrorist, anti-Al-Qaeda guy, and he was Muslim, and he had daughters and a wife and all this stuff, right? And he was like, they're oppressive to women, and he was like, hated them for sure for political reasons. Right. And he wasn't anti-Israel or anything like that, but he also was critical of the apartheid state that exists there, right? Yeah. And that's a nuance that is just not. You have to talk about it quietly.
Nobody wants to delve into this stuff. Not anymore, anyway, which is weird because you would think, and you read this letter for a class, right, Mike?
Yeah. Yep.
I don't think
part
of
a political science class.
Probably
not.
But that's kind of the thing, is you want to understand. Mm-hmm. Not to say that understanding is empathy by any stretch, but there are certainly points made in this letter. Well, hold on a second, Nate. Word for word. Yeah. No,
you can continue on, but I need to read some of it because he's about to go off the rails into Crazy Train Town.
I'm excited for that. Like I was just going to say, I skimmed it and I read, and some of the stuff I read, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. And some of the stuff I read was like, oh boy.
It goes off the rails.
So go on. Let's get there.
All right. So question 2 is for the second question of what we want to answer. What are we calling you to? And what do we want from you? AKA, what does he want from the American people?
Holocaust 2.0.
Pretty much. Number 1, the first thing we're calling you to is Islam. The religion of the unification of God, of freedom, association, partners with him, and rejection of this, blah, 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 blah. So he wants America to declare full Islam.
Conversion.
Yeah, he wants full conversion. I'm going to skip it because it's all crazy talk. It's like,
well, and part
it is the religion of unification of God, sincerity, the best of manners, righteousness. Like, we're not going to become a Muslim country. That's ridiculous.
Well, and you said at the top that the first part was what they wanted censored, and the second part, they'd be more than happy for anyone to read because it's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. It is the religion whose book, the Quran, will remain preserved and unchanged. After the other divine books and messages have been changed, the Quran talks about, he's talking about Judgment Day. Yeah. Oh, the second thing we call is to stop your oppression, lies, immorality, and debauchery that is spread among you. We call you to be people of manners, principles, honor, and purity, to reject the immoral acts of fornication, homosexuality, intoxicants, gambling, and trading with interest. We call you to all of this. You may be freed from that which you have become caught up in. You may be freed from the deceptive lies that you are a great nation, that your leaders spread amongst you to conceal from you the despicable state of which you have reached.
Says the man whose butt hurt about oil.
Right. He wants us to ban all the freedoms of the world, basically.
Yeah. So what if we like fucking? Come on.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Well, like I say, he goes off the rails into Crazy Town. We cannot skip this part because I do not want to sound like a sympathizer at all.
No, for sure.
He's a crazy man. Yeah. It is saddening to tell you that you are the worst civilization witnessed by the history of mankind. You are the nation who, rather than ruling by the Sharia of Allah and its constitution and laws, chose to invent your own laws as you will and desire. You separate religion from your policies, contradicting the pure nature which affirms absolute authority of the Lord, your creator. You flee from the embarrassing questions posed to you. How is it possible for Allah the Almighty to create his creation, grant them power over all the creatures of the land, grant them all the amenities of life, and then deny them that which they are most in need, knowledge of the laws which govern their lives? You are the nation that permits usury. Sharia, yeah. And he wants to ban usury, which is collecting taxes. Or collecting
I'm all for that.
interest. And then it was some anti-Semitic stuff about, Jews collecting usury. You are the nation that permits the production, trading, and usage of intoxicants. You also permit drugs and only forbid the trade of them, even though your nation is the largest consumer of them. You are a nation that permits acts of immorality, and you consider them to be pillars of personal freedom. You have continued to sink down this abyss from level to level until incest has spread amongst you, in the face of which neither your sense of honor nor your laws object.
Did you take a field trip to Alabama one year?
And then he talks about Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky in the White House.
Yeah, I did. I read that part. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And we're a nation that permits gambling in all forms. The companies practice this as well, resulting in the investment becoming active and the criminals becoming rich.
I mean,
which there's some truth to that.
Not all forms.
Not all
Michael
forms.
Vick got busted for dogfighting.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you are a nation that exploits women like consumer products or advertising tools, calling upon customers to purchase them. You use women to serve passengers, visitors, and strangers to increase your profit margins. You then rant that your support is the liberation of women. This is coming from the area where there's still an active slave trade.
Sharia law.
Again, it's all, you are the nation that practices the trade of sex in all forms. Directly and indirectly, giant corporations and establishments are established on this under the names of art, entertainment, tourism, and freedom, and other deceptive names you attribute to it. And because of this, you have been described in history as a nation that spreads diseases that are unknown to man in the past. Go ahead and boast to the nations of man that you brought them AIDS as a satanic American invention.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess like on one hand, with the freedoms and things, certainly there are art or artworks, be it film or music or paintings or photography or whatever, that I think are pretty fucking gross.
I'm all for personal freedom, even if it offends other people. So
look, I'm all for it as well. I'm just saying that with some of his things, like if you're watching, I don't know, let's say Leon the Professional, right? Young Natalie Portman, and she's trying to make a pass at this older man, Leon, and that's a really awkward scene.
Yes, it is.
But the movie's not really saying that that's what is acceptable and what should be right. But it is also kind of making a point about American media and talk about, well, this is what a grown-up would do. So if you want to act grown up at age, I don't know, 12 or 10 or whatever she was in the film, I could see why that character would think that. You know what I mean? But I can understand that there are things that art, movies, films, media that you would not play in Sunday school, right?
Yes.
So he's not, but like everything else, it's he's not really walking the fine line between heretic and, like prophet. He is just hop skipping across that line. Yes, there are some really fucked up art in the world, not just from America art, but then to say that we're the ones that are less free because of it or something, or, it's just.
Well, I'll follow this up because he went on this tirade basically saying that we're evil because we have freedoms, which is what the government told us at the time, right? They were lying about the scope of the government involvement. They were not lying that Osama bin Laden wanted to end American freedom.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to tell you this part, right? You have destroyed nature with your industrial waste and gases more than any other nation in history. Despite this, you refuse to sign the Kyoto agreements so that you can secure the profit of your greedy companies and industries. Your law is the law of the rich and wealthy people who hold sway in their political parties and fund their election campaigns with gifts. Behind them stand the Jews who control your policies and media and economy.
There it is.
So there it is, right? So he had called out industrial waste right after trying to bring us into Islam and right before some anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Even though if he would have left out the anti-Semitism, our government is run by the rich people and it is corrupt, right?
Yeah, for sure. We're also the first country where we invented national parks. Not that undoes everything we've done, but a lot of other countries now have set aside national or state preserves and things.
Our national park system is one of the best things our government ever did. That was TR back in the day, man.
And John Muir. We watched a whole documentary series on it. It was fantastic and fascinating. It doesn't undo everything we've done for sure, but there's a lot of other countries that don't have any of that stuff and don't have any protections put in place. And we're being criticized for destroying our natural habitat by a man who's butthurt about losing oil profits. So,
yes,
hello, pot or kettle, I'm calling you black, I guess.
Right. So right after the crazy anti-Semitism, he calls out America for slaughtering children in all their wars, for dropping the bomb on Japan, right? He calls out our hypocrisy in dealing with other countries. All right. He calls us out as being racist and how democracy and freedom is mostly for white people internally in the United States.
Yeah, but he hates Jews.
Right. Like, exactly. He calls out the overthrow of Algeria. He's bringing up good points, but then he mixes it with like this crazy anti-Semitic talk, and then some more crazy like Sharia law talk, right?
Yeah.
Yep. He talks about weapons of mass destruction and how the U.S. has a monopoly on them, and how we abuse the UN system. Of course, he also has Israel has for more than 50 years been pushing UN resolutions and rules against the wall with the full support of America, which is true. That's not anti-Semitic, but then he follows it up with some more anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Right. And then he talks about how they supported the Mujahideen and all these people they killed in all these various countries. I'm skipping some of it because it's long. You can read it for yourself, dear listener, if you wish. It's kind of like the middle of Atlas Shrugged, right? You got to skip it.
Yeah.
Talks about how we claim that we're supportive of human rights, but then we support mass atrocities. And he makes a point there, right? It's hard to say that it's not. Calls American government hypocrites. He says that America's without principles and manners. He's obsessed with manners for some reason. Somebody must have insulted him.
Yeah, I mean, somebody who wants to systematically keep women oppressed and kill all the Jews is upset about manners, because that makes sense.
I know, right? And then he calls for the American government to stop supporting India, Russia, Manila, which is the Philippines, and Israel, which those countries were all fighting against Islamic insurgents at the time.
Yeah, I can understand where it's coming from on some of this stuff, because, like you said, a lot of it's true. We can't really argue that America's fairly hypocritical in a lot of things in a lot of areas, and that they take our tax money and use it to fund wars because that's what makes the top 1% the wealthiest.
Yes.
But you also have to take into account his own kind of personal and his religious beliefs, and then understand that I think he's trying to play the victim card, and I don't know that he actually was being an oil baron.
He is an elite, a global elite.
Yeah. So
born into the purple.
Sympathy kind of ends there,
Right.
You want to call us out? Okay.
Right, and he calls for the United States also to stop supporting all these dictators, and he lists them off. and he asks for the United States to deal with them on a mutually beneficial basis. But then, of course, he follows it up with some anti-Semitism.
Yeah,
because he wants the U.S. government to help Al Qaeda kill Jews.
Yeah, I mean, that was his ultimate goal, was to somehow force us to be an ally.
Yeah, he wants us to become a nation. He wants us to become a nation of Islam, basically.
Yeah,
that's his ultimate goal, which is psychotic, right? That's where all the crazy talk. Because now, by the way, it's like a full page of just like crazy Islamic nationalism and how we should become Muslims to kill the Jews. Yeah. Which I do not support that in any way, shape, or form. No. I am a Unitarian. I am not interested in converting.
Yeah, any kind of crusades or jihads, you can count me out of.
Yes, and now we made it through the end, because the last page is all like just a anti-Semitic diatribe, pro-Islamic nonsense talk, and I'm more than comfortable calling it nonsense talk. But yeah, so, and like I say, the biggest issue isn't why would you want to ban people from reading that?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I am very firmly and strongly 100% against censorship in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, yes.
This is let's not confuse this, though. I am not going to let my daughter and my son watch R-rated movies tomorrow, being 3 and 5 months. You know, there's age appropriateness, but that's not the same as censoring.
Right. No, it is not.
So, you know, I think the censorship of anything, in my mind, when something's censored, then I try and seek it out so that I can consume it. That doesn't mean that I agree with what I'm consuming, reading or watching or whatever, but I feel like that's what should be or should have been one of the biggest pinnacles of America is you should be free of censorship.
Yes. So,
and I mean, largely, I guess we kind of are, because we can still find this letter, and we can still
find it. Yeah, they're trying to make it more difficult. Yes. We are also computer literate, and I think a lot of this is to control access to like the normies.
Yeah.
So my biggest argument against censorship in general is a gentleman named Daryl Davis. You probably don't know his name, but you know who he is. He is the African-American musician who has converted dozens of members of the KKK out of their lifestyle via social media. Yeah. And he has several sets of Klansman robes in his house. And it's kind of like his side project outside of being a professional working musician. I
saw him online, you know, like the story about him befriending all these KKK people.
Yeah, the best solution to like all this crazy, nonsensical, evil belief is to have these people interact with the rest of the world and see that what they're saying is nonsense and evil and ridiculous. It's not to isolate them and let them live in an echo chamber in their like compound or whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and I think, and I talked about this when we talked about The Case for Christ, the book.
Yes.
And that's, you know, written by people that I don't have any shared beliefs with. But I read it because I wanted to challenge myself. You know, if you're only reading things that support what you believe, that doesn't help strengthen your belief, really. You know, you have to read the other stuff, and you have to see if there are good points or valid points being made, because it causes you to reevaluate some of the stuff that you believe, and that's how you grow. You don't grow by reading the same stuff and reading stuff that only agrees with your worldview. You have to read that other stuff out there to grow, you know, and you might find out that you're more committed to your belief set after reading something from the opposing side, or you might realize like, hey, we're actually not that different, you know. And I think if Osama bin Laden could take out all of the religious and Jew-hating stuff, then he makes some good points. But they're kind of elementary level points or middle school level points of, you know, the American people control where all their tax dollars go. I wish, you know.
Well, the fact is that the American government does not want people discussing the level of culpability of American policy in creating the problem. They want us to focus on the clearly evil parts that we don't agree with, which we should focus on. Don't get me wrong. But I guarantee you're not going to be able to start a movement based on hating America for being a liberal democracy if we're not also supporting dictatorships in their countries, right? Like,
I mean, you can start a movement that way, but you're not going to affect change that way. I mean,
well, you're going to be like Timothy McVeigh, and he's a one-off guy. Like, that's who this is. He's not. you're not going to change his
do a bad
mind.
thing that everybody hates, and then any valid points you had are kind of out the window because you've got all this psychobabble along with it.
Right. It's rare that we get an evil that is like totally psychotic and has no good points. It has happened in the past. World War II leaders come to mind when it's like, I cannot think of a single thing that guy said. I was like, yeah, that's a good point. And that's where, like, I've read Mein Kampf. It's crazy talk, right? Like, it's poorly written crazy talk by a guy who is largely not literate and a crazy person. So
and upset at the world for his shake at things, but
and he did get a bad shake. He was hurt in World War I, and there's other factors that go into creating this monster that should be analyzed so that we can prevent it from happening to others, right? Like preventative, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say.
Yeah, that's why NFTs were a thing for a while, because nobody wanted to say, no, that's not art.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway, hopefully, I still have cigar left. Do you?
My fingers are burning. I've got a smidge left.
Okay, well, we can wrap it up.
Well, let's do final thoughts on this. If you have more things you want to say, I don't mind hanging for a little bit extra while you finish yours. You've certainly done the same for me.
Well, thank you.
Episodes that I talk more. So
I do have a couple final thoughts. I have two things to say about the letter itself, which is the parts that we can at least acknowledge have truth in them are very dangerous, and that's why it's being censored. And it's disturbing to me that corporations, supposed news corporations like The Guardian, are willing to censor primary documents of very pivotal individuals in our history so that they can support corrupt government actions. And I'm against it.
Yes.
Also, I think it's important for people to read because you really do get to listen to this crazy anti-Jewish terrorist guy run his mouth about how he wants to create an Islamic state in America and go out and like commit genocide, which is
and paint this
horrible and evil.
Blood of Jews.
Yeah, I mean it's horrible and evil. Parts of it are definitely bad, and you should be exposed to both. Right? Like the world is not a perfect place. Not everybody is like a supervillain or a superhero and is like Superman where he's nothing bad to say about the guy, right?
Yeah.
And that nuance is important to understand the world, right? And if things are complicated as adults, we should all know that. Right? Like shit is complicated. You would hope everybody would know that. It's not as easy as 1 + 1 = 2 all the time. So
yeah, and it's not as easy as black and white. There are numerous shades of gray, probably more than 50, I would think.
Right.
If we're talking about things that weren't well written. But, understanding this is important. Understanding, it's the age-old line of those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. Maybe we can see some of this babble from this letter in maybe some of our current politicians, maybe some of our ex-politicians, maybe some other world leaders,
Most definitely. I've seen some crazy news coverage in the last couple of weeks, people. Some things that are very clearly propaganda that is nothing but lies. And it's frightening. It's very frightening, especially because I know a certain amount of people believe it without questioning. And that could lead to very negative consequences. I'm sure that people that died in Afghanistan or Iraq or the Middle East in general fighting in those wars. I do. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have been there necessarily, but we certainly didn't do the things necessary to prevent the problem in the long term, right? We did nothing to prevent the long-term issue from reoccurring.
Yeah, we didn't do anything to prevent it from reoccurring. All we did by going there and staying there for the 20 years that we were there basically gives more credence to this letter in some sense. Like if you're of the Islamic persuasion and you believe that America's run by Jews and the Jews read this letter and got upset that they were being called out, then it's only perpetuating Osama's psychobabble about
Unfortunately,
Islam being
I agree.
the true religion and everything. And, it's, should we have responded to 9/11? Yeah, 100%. Did we do it in the best way possible? Probably not.
Probably, I would say definitely not. I would say demonstrably not.
Yeah. So I don't know. I know that a lot of things are profitable for the wealthy politicians that are in charge of everything here, whatever their religious background is. I think we've determined that it's not 100% Jewish.
If you look at the richest and most powerful people in the world, they're definitely not all Jewish. So I don't know how else to put that.
Majority
right?
Jewish.
No, there's no, it's a spackling. Of course, like look at who's the richest people. Like just look the list up. Vladimir Putin is one of them. So and I think maybe to tie it back in with what I thought we were going to talk about is if you're disagreeing with somebody at the Thanksgiving table this year or the holiday tables coming up with your family, I know that's a big theme, right? Is you have to go and have dinner with your family, and a lot of them don't have the same viewpoints that you do, or maybe there's two uncles that always get into it every holiday season. Maybe this holiday season, try and figure out what's behind their viewpoints, or ask them what has influenced their opinions in a non-condescending way, and then read whatever that is, and see if there's any ounce of truth in it for you, or maybe it just gives you an understanding of why they're as crazy as they are. I know this does not need to be said, but apparently it does, because people fight with their families at family events. Whenever I have had a heated discussion with somebody, instead of responding with anger and trying to lash out, I typically try to explore their thoughts until I truly understand what they're trying to say. Because typically the first thing that comes out isn't really what they're trying to say, right? Like the brain and the mouth aren't connecting 100%. Yeah, a little more detail. And then you can disagree with their detail and more nuanced perspective vehemently if necessary.
Yeah.
And this might come up at some of your Thanksgivings because it's in the news right now. So big in the news.
Yes. Also, they might just be upset because they don't know how to have a continuous, sustainable male orgasm. So share that wealth of knowledge with them, how they can back their man juice up into their bladder.
Kegels and the P-spot, right?
There you go. That's it. I've put my cigar down because I want to keep my fingertips, but it was fantastic.
It was wonderful. Rocky Patel rarely doesn't perform. It's usually a very good cigar. So
yes,
I agree. I recommend if you see one of these, get it.
Yes, or get two for your closest family relative who's on the opposite side of, I don't know, an issue than you.
Yes, and this is not for a newbie. This is a dark, spicy, sweet. This is a powerful cigar. This is not a starter cigar. No. Moon Trance, it is not, but it is very good.
Yes, it is very, very good.
So I think that's it, everybody. Be safe, have fun.
Enjoy your Thanksgiving. We are thankful for you for listening to us.